Tonight, we're here to chat about the Oscars. The Academy Awards are happening next week, and there's a lot of buzz about the nominees this year. I imagine many of you already have your favorite movies and actors that you're rooting for, so we thought it would be important to host a conversation on the history of the Oscars and how Black actors, actresses, directors have been treated by the Academy. So let me introduce tonight's speakers. Elamin and Dr. G, can you please join me on stage? Wonderful. Nice to see you. So Professor Frederick W, Jr., Dr. G, is a historian and associate professor of African American Studies within the Honors College at Texas Christian University. His research focuses on contemporary mainstream media with a particular focus on racial concerns. Now, today's event is about his latest book, Black Oscars, which is about what the Academy Awards tell us about African Americans. And to guide the conversation tonight, I'm excited to introduce Elamin Abdelmahmoud, who is a culture writer, a critic, and a podcast host. Now, you might have read his columns on BuzzFeed News, where he dissects popular music and film, or maybe you know him as a host of Pop Chat, which is the CBC's weekly podcast on pop culture. And as if that weren't enough, he also co-hosts the CBC podcast Party Lines with Rosemary Barton. So enough from me. Elamin, thank you for hosting tonight, and take it away.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Jorge. And I'm really happy to be here with you, Dr. G. How's your evening going?
Super fantastic. Thank you for asking. And I would like to, at the very beginning, just respectfully acknowledge all Native American peoples who have lived on the land in which I'm living since time immemorial. We at Texas Christian University acknowledge and pay respect to the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose historical homeland our university is located.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to start with, first of all, the size of this beautiful book, because this is a thick book, man. Like you are not a casual fan of the movies if you go through putting this beautiful, massive thing together. I want to talk to you about lots of the stuff that's in here, but I just want to start with your relationship to film. Where did it start? How did it get there?
Thank you, Elamin. I appreciate that question. You're right. I guess it's important that we maybe preface, this discussion with this reminder that I wouldn't spend as much time analyzing movies if I didn't have a love for the movies, right? So It's not like I've been axe to grind. I am indeed critical of Hollywood, and I believe justifiably so, right? I'm indeed critical of the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, and I believe justifiably so. But again, this is coming from a place where I believe in the power of movies to connect us, right? And so in terms of my love for movies, it probably was started when I was younger. I mean, I credit my mother, God rest her soul, for introducing me to what I now know to be critical analysis of the movies. And what do I mean by this? What I mean, Elamin, is that I don't know if you remember these inventions, but they were called, VHS, and so
I'm not that young.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Yes.
So, because the thing is, I mean, and again, we were coming up, I'm not trying to say I was poor or anything of that nature, but at the same time, we weren't of the status whereby Friday night, let's go downtown, pay for parking, pay for 5 tickets. So I was family 5 tickets for the show, dinner beforehand, and then dessert. We just didn't have, that wasn't Friday night. So
that's a $200 night. If
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so movies was, I think, a more economical way by which we were all able to spend time together and still be entertained. And so my mother, God bless her, she would, always keep pausing the videotape, right? Oh, did you see that? And we rewind. And then, because oftentimes I would just miss little details. And then all of a sudden we would develop this little inside language and, our jokes and just observing these little nuances, whether it be lapses in logic or, just, clever, little lines. And so at an early age, I was already, just looking very carefully at movies. And so I think it just grew to where, I would do the same thing, just watching. And I guess maybe coming full circle, I am fortunate to be blessed with a beautiful queen from Trinidad and Tobago. 24 years, I was telling you, I have a couple of kids of my own. And so, I'm sitting here, watching movies with them, and they're like, can you let us watch the movie? You need to go do something. Go write a book. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I will. So here we are.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I want to pick up on something that you said there about you having criticisms of the academy. There is something to the work of criticism that I think, like, you know, sometimes like we read about books that are critical of certain institutions and go, well, that person's just trying to like tear that place down. And I fundamentally think that's a misunderstanding of what a critic's role is, or a critic's, like, I guess, like, motivations are, because you wouldn't write this much if you weren't optimistic about at least a possibility of change. Like, I do think that criticism is a labor of optimism. It comes from a place of saying, I recognize that there's potential that someone's going to read this and say, there's a problem, and I would like to figure out a way to fix it. So I wanted to ask you about that optimism. How much of it do you have?
You know, I mean, we could, I think, use some of your optimism on this side of the border, you know, because it's so very beautifully stated. I mean, because you're right. I mean, my father taught me earlier, beware of the coach with nothing to say. Right? You know, so the idea that, you know, like, Mom, Dad, you know, why are you always on my case? You know, even the Queen, like, she's always like, you know, but it's only because they care and they're invested. And so that's why they're paying attention and they want what's best. And so I am cautiously optimistic, right? Because unfortunately, some of the patterns I've discovered in the book have been pretty stubborn, right? The patterns have been pretty stubborn. Though I do have, you know, encouragement, and that's what I put in the chat, you know, based upon Jorge's, you know, encouragement, over this idea that if more of us continue to remain in dialogue, and if maybe we're able to calibrate what it is that we're seeing, then I think Hollywood at some point is going to have to respond to the market if they want to continue to make money off of this.
That is like that is at least an entry point into optimism. You know, it doesn't have to be like, you know, morally motivated, like, oh, we should fix this. It's like, there's a case for you to fix this. So let's get into some of the stuff that you uncovered. And I want to start with the fact that I recently, like in the last year or so, rewatched Titanic, and watching Titanic, it doesn't immediately occur to you, but eventually occurs to you that there are no Black people in Titanic. They're just like, they just do not exist. Not even peripherally to the story. And this is fine. And by this I mean that, like, I can watch Titanic and not feel any sort of lack and deficit of empathy towards the white people who are drowning, because I'm like, I know what that is like. I know, like, I can imagine that this is a harrowing experience, and I have empathy and I can conjure it up. So this is all despite not being a white person myself. Who is the audience member who needs the Kevin Costner character in Hidden Figures?
Great question. I mean, listen, I mean, I think to answer it in two parts, let me start with the surprise answer first. I think that people of color in some ways are looking for affirmation of the pattern by which they're familiar, right? And so in many ways, when you look at Kevin Costner in Hidden Figures, I'm so glad you pointed that out, because he is a prominent figure in the movie. And more importantly, the director, Theodore Melfi, actually admitted that the pivotal scene whereby, you know, he rips down the segregated sign for the bathroom, because the idea is that, you know, I think what was powerful about the scene was it shows the illogic behind racism. Yes. The idea that eliminating bodily waste is something that is germane to us all. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter, you know, what gender you are. We all, at some point in time, have to eliminate bodily waste. It has nothing to do with race. It just has to do with your humanity. So the idea that we actually had a segregated system whereby it was actually absolutely inefficient and illogical for someone to have to go way out of their way to a segregated bathroom. I mean, the idea that we would segregate waste through the pipes that it goes to a main sewer. It just doesn't make any sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, it reminds me about some of the larger logics that took place, such as segregated cemeteries. I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to pause for a second on this. I mean, just think about, like in my country, how damaging this is, whereby even when I'm dead and gone, my decaying flesh cannot decompose next to your decaying flesh, because when you were alive, your flesh was of a lighter hue. And so we're buried 6 feet underground. Both of our bodies are decomposing, but yet we still have to be segregated in this type of, I mean, when you look at the logical extreme, just this idea of racism doesn't make any sense. So bringing it back to the bathrooms, in this scenario, Hidden Figures, Kevin Costner dramatically rips down the sign, colors only, what have you. It says no more segregated bathrooms, no more white bathrooms, just bathrooms, right? Great scene, but you can look it up. According to the director, Theodore Melfi, that scene was fabricated. And so the question, I think, becomes, if the movie is presumptively about 3 Black women, Hidden Figures being a double entendre, Hidden Figures referring to the calculations necessary for the United States to win the space race, and then Hidden Figures meaning that the people who are overlooked, their agency was overlooked. Why aren't their stories strong enough to just tell their stories if the movie's about them? So I think in many ways, to answer your question, the second part first is, many people of color have been conditioned over time to where if they don't see a white male taking action, it doesn't lend validity to the enterprise, right? Looking for that affirmation. And then conversely, I think cynically, and it's unfortunately true, this is what I call, in my other book about movies, it's called You Mean There's Race in My Movie, right? I've created this vocabulary term called the white anchor, meaning that for many white audiences, the concern for many producers and directors is that if we don't have a white anchor, a focal point for the majority white audience by which they can see themselves, then no one's going to patronize the movie. And notice what you said earlier. You grew up, or you watched the Titanic. Here, your background, Sudan, Canada, right? The idea is that you watched the Titanic. There is a single soul in there looking like you or me in the Titanic, but you saw the movie and were able to maybe enjoy most of it, right?
Yeah.
King of the world, okay, no worries. And so we're able to have this vicarious experience all the time. Like you said, I grew up Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, he was my hero. Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was my hero. Bruce Willis in Die Hard, he was my hero. But then ironically, if we're asking white audiences to take on someone who looks like you or me as a hero, all of a sudden all bets are off. I'm not so sure about that. Oh, but if I put Kevin Costner in the middle and I just fabricate a scene and invent and inject and insert white heroism, now all of a sudden, oh, I understand that now. Now I can watch the movie. I think that's a very problematic dynamic, because if we're humans, then if the story is good enough, then that's what we should be basing our hat on.
That makes me think about Mississippi Burning, and like the unbelievable efforts that movie goes towards hope, like humanizing FBI characters who, like, we know did not act in particularly moral ways in these circumstances. Like truly bends over backwards to make them these like really sympathetic characters, because the movie feels like it needs them. And very explicitly, I think, was stated, like they were written this way because there's like a desire for audiences to connect with that kind of character. I guess my question becomes, if this pattern keeps repeated over and over and over again, even though it's been criticized over and over again, it's not because the criticism isn't valid. It must be because there's something deeper, more entrenched about the recreation of these systems and the recreation of these narratives. What do you think that might be?
I think what it is that the effort is there, and I acknowledge that, right? So, and so for example, let's take Hidden Figures. It reminds me also, say, like a movie like The Help, right? Where the intention was to bring audiences together and to tell a story so that we could feel good about this idea of community in a larger sense. But at the same time, intent is not enough, right?
No.
You know, I think what we have to look at is the impact, right? You know, and so, Dr. G, that sounds kind of harsh. Well, not really. I mean, let's think about parachutes. You can intend to design a parachute that works, but no one wants to hear about you intended to do it if the parachute doesn't work. What we want to hear about is the impact, that you made a parachute that works not 8 out of 10 times, not 9 out of 10 times, but a parachute that works 10 out of 10 times. That's the impact that we're looking for. And your intent to make a parachute that works, that only works 8 out of 10 times, it still, unfortunately, is not good enough. Okay, and so therefore, it's a difficult playing field. If y'all can stay with me, when we talk about the movies, I think there's an attempt to bring audiences together, tell these stories, but what I'm trying to remind audiences about is good enough, right? In terms of us really hitting the nail on the head. And so when you look at a movie like The Help, I ask audiences all the time, well, who does The Help really help, right? You know, in terms of, you know, telling the story, who's truly the protagonist, who's truly driving the action? Again, going back to Hidden Figures. And I think that when you tell these stories, you know, it's because it's awkward, because it's difficult, there's this tendency to want to placate and ameliorate the difficulties in dealing with the pain behind racism. So for example, going back to Hidden Figures, the idea that, oh, well, okay, well, whew, it wasn't all that bad, was it? You have Kevin Costner's character. He was a good white man. He actually stood up. He actually did something about it, right? And so then audiences are able to walk away, you know, feeling relieved. But guess what? I'm not feeling relieved, you know, because I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, take this in a dark direction, but, you know, when you talk about the stress that, you know, many Canadians are dealing with, I'm dealing with a little bit of stress of my own over here in the States. And that would be reliving the George Floyd murder, right? We all realized on May 25th, we all saw with our own eyes the horrific, depraved disregard for human life. I can't explain it to you, Elamin. I just can't. I don't know the justification. I can't explain it to you. Because here's my problem real quick. And I'm going to get you a question. But here's my problem real quick. The fact of the matter is that for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, you have your knee on this unarmed, handcuffed Black man's neck on the floor, right? So here's the issue. Power and control. Power and control. I'll repeat one more time. Power and control. So here's the issue, Elamin. You know, because the defense is trying to say that, well, the crowd was all around and he had to maintain power and control. Really? So here's the deal. You stand up, he's still handcuffed. You stand up, he's still on his stomach. You stand up, he's still unarmed. You stand up, you still have the gun. You stand up, you still have the badge. I don't understand the problem. I don't understand the issue. Power and control, right? And this idea that, you know, we reliving the trial because it's a year later. And not only that, earlier this week, Sunday, God bless his soul, God rest his soul, Dante Wright, just 10 miles away from the scenario, also lost his life, right? In a situation that, you know, a 26-year veteran on the force mistakes her gun for taser for a gun or vice versa. I don't understand. So what I'm saying is this: when you talk about these scenarios as far as what people are really living through, it is horrific. And so this idea that, well, it wasn't all that bad, that's part of the selling point. Think about The Help. The Help didn't talk anything about #MeToo. #MeToo. There was no #MeToo around for many of these Black women who were victimized. We didn't see that aspect of The Help. No, what we saw was, oh, remember the last scene on screen was Minnie is sharing fried chicken cooking duties with the mistress. All is well and good. We're all happy. But my question for you, Elamin, is after they cook the meal, after they eat the meal, who's going to do the dishes? So in other words, many white audiences want to leave with this idea that maybe it's not that bad. So they feel good. But the question is, do we want to feel good or feel right? That's for me the larger question.
So there is, thank you for that. That was a really powerful answer. And I want to focus on a couple of things that you said in there, because I think it's important to connect the feeling good aspect to the it's the regularity of these movies that we get. You know, the most recent of which was like maybe Green Book that I can think of. Green Book is a good example of this. The Help is a good example of this. The Blind Side.
Yeah.
God, like Cry Freedom is a good example of this. You know, like that's a Denzel Washington joint. Like there's like this like long history of movies that I guess like sell you on the idea of we're going to deal with a rich Black story.
Right.
But then the camera only follows the white characters. And in following the white characters, like it actually like it ends up invoking like an emotional response. Like these movies get, first of all, they get critically, acclaimed. But second of all, like people cry and like they maybe kind of like walk away feeling good about themselves. That is a part of what these movies are meant to do. And some of them are like well-made films, but like, God, like they're doing cultural work.
I mean, I agree with you, like not 100, but 101%, because the fact of the matter is these movies are doing exactly what they're designed to do. They are designed to make us feel good and feel optimistic, but in many ways it's at the expense of oversimplifying the equation, right? So looking at the Blind Side, like you said, I facetiously say that maybe the movie should have been retitled The Blonde Side, right? It really just focused on Sandra Bullock's character, and if anything, I thought it was demeaning, this idea that you have SJ, this diminutive school-aged kid. I mean, I don't even know if he's in middle school. He's like in elementary school. And he's negotiating the terms of Michael Oher's collegiate career. Really? And so he's using condiments and ketchup bottles to explain to Michael Oher how to play football. Really? And again, so think about this. But if you're white and you're coming into the theater, remember, you take out of the theater what you're bringing into it. And so if SJ, which was the name of the character's name, if he reminds you of your son, your grandson, your nephew, your cute neighbor next door, or of yourself, of course you like this movie. He's garrulous, he's verbose, he's taking initiative. I mean, we can come up with all the superlatives. But if you're looking at it from the angle of, dare I say, the protagonist, I mean, arguably the movie was about him and his life, right?
Yes.
Arguably. But if you're looking at it from his angle, the question is how much is there to actually celebrate, right?
Yes.
I mean, and so I think you're right. This idea that, the intention is to bring audiences together, but in terms of the full execution, maybe we would do a better job if we had more people like you and me in the rooms while we're having these discussions about how to draw up the script. And I only say that because, listen, the Writers Guild of America, this is the club you need to join. It's called a union. Union is a bad word in my country. I don't know why, but this is the club you have to join if you want to see your work product, manifest on screen.
Yes.
So, I mean, what if I told you it was over 90% white? Right? So it's not to say all white people are evil. I have plenty of white friends. I go to their grillings. We have a good time. It's awesome, right? But my point is, if you only have one perspective in the room, then we lower the chances of us being able to tell a story in its full complex capacity. Because as you know, us humans can be complicated. And the idea that racism in the South can be as simple as cooking fried chicken and we're good, we have to do better than that.
Listen, speaking of rooms that are not particularly complex, what do I have to do to get a Pixar Black character who stays Black the whole time on screen? Like, at what point do I get this one?
Man, you're picking scabs right now. All right, so listen. So, okay.
Just one. I just want one.
Can we talk about it? Can we talk about it for a second?
Yes. Yeah, go into it.
So, all right. If we're talking about the movie Soul,
we are.
Soul is the first animated Disney / Pixar movie featuring a Black protagonist. But Dr. G, but Elamin, what about Princess and the Frog? Well, for those of you who's keeping score at home, that was what we call cell animation drawing. That was like, so in other words, there's a movie made in the realm of, say, Bambi, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, right? The older films, that was like the last of the cell animation drawings, right?
Yes.
Even The Lion King was cell animation drawing. So, and then going to your point, even with that movie, maybe we should retitle that movie not Princess and the Frog, but The Princess is the Frog, right? I mean, she spent more time on, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so that's that.
Way more time as a frog. Way more time. Yes.
All right, I wasn't ribbing it, but here's the deal. Let's segue, if I can, to this thing called soul. So,
yes.
Here's A. When you look at, the animated films produced by Pixar, when I think of the Tangled of the world, even Raya, right, that just came out in early March, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or, dare I forget, Frozen. How can I let that go? The idea is that many of these films feature young protagonists. They're youthful. They're like teenagers or something of that nature. So A is here when we have Soul, the first protagonist, in the animated movie with the Black protagonist. It just so happens it stars Joe Gardner, Jamie Foxx's voice, as a middle-aged jazz middle school teacher. That's interesting. Okay, so is that racist? No, I didn't say that. I just said that's interesting, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know how many, I don't know the next time we go to Disney World, how many kids are going to be running all around with the stuffed animal of Joe Gardner with this pooch pop belly, right? I can't wait to be this 40-something-year-old jazz middle school teacher.
Yeah, like I love his mustache. He's so great. Yes,
Man, so awesome. Look at his spectacles. Oh man, So what a spectacle. So here's the deal.
Yes.
That's A. B is he dies early in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, the penultimate question, I mean, why does the Black guy die first, right? And so unfortunately, this goes into that. And because, again, I actually did the data and I crunched the numbers. Did you know that nearly a quarter of all Black Academy Award nominees die before the end of the movie?
That was the next thing I was going to ask you about. That was literally my next question.
I mean, what is going on? What's in the water? Right? I mean, no, that's significant. I didn't say like 2.5%. I said a quarter. So, okay, So he dies. But here's the C part, right? And if you bear with me, right? And again, this is a spoiler alert, y'all. If you haven't seen the movie Soul, it's a spoiler alert. But it may be worth it.
It's in the trailer. I mean, I feel like he dies in the trailer for the
movie.
Like in the very trailer. Like, you're not spoiling anything.
See, this is where they got me. Because I guess here's the issue. Remember, I said you take out of it what you go into the theater with. Yeah. So I went into the theater with, the hopes and aspirations. Maybe I was feeling no. I'm sorry. I was on a roll. Remember, Black Panther just came out 2.5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, oh man, you know what I'm saying? We're starting to build some momentum. So I went in there selfishly, foolishly, thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna see my image. I can't wait. And so I missed the cat. I missed the cat on the poster. The cat's on the poster, but I missed it, on the piano keyboard, right? So ladies and gentlemen, what happens is when you look at the poster, you'll see Joe Gardner walking, on the keyboard because he's a jazz pianist. And then there's this cat. I never noticed it. It's kind of random. Allow me to explain really briefly. He dies. And so here he is in the great beyond, and now he's trying to get to the great before. The great beyond is basically your soul is dead and it will transcend. So now he's trying to go to the great before to try to get back into his body on earth because he felt he wasn't fulfilled in living out his dream as a pianist, right? He never made it. So the thing is, he does make it back to earth. But the catch is he makes it back into the body of the cat. So here's the deal. Elamin, real quick, I'm not trying to dominate, but real quick, this is all I gotta say. I don't know if you heard about this movie. It came out in 2017. It was a horror movie. It was directed by Jordan Peele. It was like avant-garde, and the premise.
I've seen Get Out several times.
Get Out. That's what it was called. I'm absent-minded. Right, I'm absent-minded. So the premise I believe was a Black body was to be dispossessed of its consciousness. That was the premise of a horror movie in 2017. Lo and behold, we fast forward to 2021, and that is the very same premise of this animated Disney movie. The Black man, Jamie Foxx, was dispossessed of his body in favor of Tina Fey, the white female. She now inhabited her consciousness inhabited his body. He was in the cat. And here's the part for me that makes it a hard no. The climax, and I'm sorry y'all if I'm spoiling, but the climax is he realizes that he's selfish for wanting his own body back. And he agrees to sacrifice his own body. I don't understand this. It was a horror movie in 2017. I'm supposed to celebrate this? I mean, I will not pay for the privilege to poison myself. I don't know about you, but I still got a lot to do. I got a lot of living to do. I'm trying to wake up tomorrow morning in my own body. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be reincarnated by a cat tomorrow morning. I don't understand this. I don't understand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right to feel all of those things. I think there was something about the way that they positioned Soul, something about the excitement about promoting it, being like, whoa, we finally have a Black lead character in a Pixar movie. This is going to be huge. And there's just like, it's like the consistency of these characters dying right off the top or not existing in their body for the rest of the movie. And it's like, can a Black person just remain Black for the duration of the film? Like that is all I ask. And that doesn't sound like a big ask, honestly.
No, it doesn't, Elamin. And here's the deal. To your point, what hopefully I can contribute with this latest offering, this latest publication is in addition to the quantity, right? Because I think numbers are helpful. Numbers tell us a story, but I don't believe numbers tell us the full story, right? So by way of quick example, not to blame or shame anybody, I'll just talk about my own university. It's a predominantly white university. And literally, I was at a cabinet meeting earlier this year, and the provost was like, last year we had 25.5% minority population. This year, we experienced an increase to 26.3. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds awesome. I don't know if I've detected that 0.8% increase, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, but by virtue of the numbers, we have improved. That only tells us part of the story. So what I'm suggesting to everyone out here listening is that in addition to the quantity, we should also look at the quality. So for example, I mean, if we're saying that, oh, well, that's the first movie, you know, with numbers, and that's one movie with one protagonist that, you know, he has all these lines. Okay, quantity. But our discussion is going into this qualitative analysis. But what was the quality of his role? How much of an avant-garde breakthrough is it if he's not possessed in his own body? And then he realizes that his body is not his to keep anyway. I'm a little confused by that. I mean, I have to say, for honesty, he does get his body back, but it's in the last 23 seconds after he made the decision to sacrifice. So again, I'm really interested in the quality of the roles that we see on screen. That's what, because I don't want us to just fall for the hook where we stop our discussion and stop, pushing the envelope in terms of, what we feel that we need, only because we should be so happy with the idea that we now counted 3 Native Americans in this movie. There's 2 Native Americans in that movie. No, I think we should push past that and actually think about, well, what is their dynamic to the other characters? Are they being valued for who they are on screen?
I want to go back to the stat that you mentioned, because you developed a few angles, you developed a few frames of looking at the types of roles that Black actors get that earn them nominations to begin with. And as you mentioned, a quarter of Black nominees have to die for the nomination. They got to die in the movie. 80% of them got to be poor. And like Gary Oldman just has to be old and white, right? Like Gary Oldman can be in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, or he can be in Darkest Hour, or this year he's in Mank, and like he's just different iterations of an older white man, sometimes with glasses, sometimes not, and like that's like enough for him to get the nomination. Why is Black Death so interesting to Hollywood?
I'll tell you why. And real quick before I tell you about that, let's not forget movies about like Tron or even The Irishman, where you have older white male actors and they literally will use computer graphic animation to make them appear younger, right? Because they just like their character or their personality so much. So you're literally going out of your way rather than cast somebody new. You're still trying to hold on to this image. So I think that's fascinating as well. But in terms of why that's the case, repeat the question really quickly.
Why is Black Death so interesting?
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
The answer is this. Unfortunately, in my country,
Mm-hmm.
even though Blacks have been free for quite some time, technically, I guess, with the elimination of enslavement, and I try to use the word enslavement to remind us that there's a verb taking place, because you know people say slaves like desk, chair, hand me the remote, like the help. No, these are not inanimate objects. These are people with ideas, thoughts, aspirations, feelings. So when the era of enslavement ended in 1865, we were free, but we were never treated equal, unfortunately, Elamin. And so I think ever since then, there's been this tension over, quote unquote, keeping the Negro in his place. Literally, you have the advent and creation of the Black codes. I don't know to what degree they cover this in Canadian, history classes, but the Black codes sprouted up in many Southern states who simply wanted to hold on and retain the way of life, that civilization of cavaliers and maidens fair that was gone with the wind, right? Literally, right? And so they created these codes that essentially criminalized, Blackness and Black people. And for those of you who want to read up more about this, you can, you can watch Ava DuVernay's brilliant documentary called 13th, where she talks about how the convict lease system was essentially the same game by a different name with these trumped up charges from the Black codes. I say that to say that Black humanity has always been struggling for full recognition ever since we were termed 3/5 of a person in the Constitution. It's still in there, right? If you look at it, it's still in there. So when we talk about these deaths, that is a manifestation of the concept that Black lives just don't matter as much. And so therefore, this technique is called canvassing, where whites will often project onto the Black body the most brutal, like heinous, like perverse fantasies of what should happen to a human body. So what's fascinating is take a closer look. When Black people die, it's often like the villain's death. And, and it's often early in the movie and it signals to us, oh, wow, this is a serious situation, because you can't allow that to happen to our white protagonists. And so the Black body becomes expendable. It becomes this canvas by which we're able to paint upon, these imaginative horrors, right? And, and also this dovetails into this other piece, what you said earlier about the poverty and racism that we see. Yes. Over 80% of all Black Academy nominated roles deal with this concept of poverty and racism. And I call it the gravity of reality, right? That Blacks, Indigenous, and people of color are always grounded by the gravity of reality, as opposed to my white brothers and sisters who are often liberated by the freedom of fantasy. And so therefore, more times than not, to answer your question, even if the person doesn't die, when we go see a movie and a Black person is prominently featured, typically this Black person is in pain. So Elamin, let me ask you, what is so entertaining or titillating about Lupita Nyong'o getting stripped naked and whipped? She won an Oscar for what again? Like, oh, that was riveting acting. Is that acting? Or is there some sort of titillation factor? I mean, remember, this is not a documentary. It's not a documentary. So there's an entertainment aspect to this. The movie was made for profit. So what is so special or fascinating about seeing a Black woman stripped half naked and whipped? Even with Glory, Denzel Washington's Academy Award winning role. Arguably, he won that role because of that pivotal scene when he, was stripped half naked and whipped, and that lone tear came down his cheek. So in other words, it's almost like we've been conditioned to be entertained by Black pain. Well, I mean, even look at Fences and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Here's what's complicated about those movies. Because again, I'm an August Wilson fan. In fact, I believe Joe Turner Coming On is one of his best works, right? I've seen it in the theater. But here's the deal, Elamin. Here's what's complicated about it. A is movies like this are what I call insular films, meaning that you only have Black people in the movie. So of course you have to develop the characters and make them more complicated. Because typically the issue is when Blacks share the screen with whites, that's when the hierarchy emerges in terms of power and control. But B, there was this. While they're complex and nuanced, and while they highlight aspects of the struggle, which are important, at the same time, these movies appear to project this pain aspect that sometimes people who come into the theater have no context for. And so therefore they may walk away from it with the, oh, wow, that was interesting. That was really entertaining. You see, that was really a riveting scene, and not really making the larger connection. And the last thing I'll say about those movies is that I think they do have their value in place, but Elamin, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, think about the week that we've been having here in America. A, reliving the trial, and B, hearing about Dante Wright, and C, just being back in America, that, that in and of itself has its cost. So on a daily basis, I already have a certain amount of stress and tension I'm trying to navigate. I have a Black daughter. I'm trying to keep beautiful. I have a Black son. I'm trying to keep confident, right? So my question is, why is it on Friday night? Why am I motivated to pay for the privilege to see other people in pain? Sometimes I want to be in the faraway land of dinosaurs too, right? Sometimes I want to escape to a time and space where people are in spaceships shooting photon torpedoes at Death Stars. Sometimes that's what I'm in the mood for as well. But yet, when it comes to the Black experience, most of the time when you see is only within that limited paradigm of pain, poverty, and racism.
I appreciate that you brought up Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, because it feels like, at least with the slate of movies that we have this year, that maybe something is changing, or at least like Hollywood would like us to think so, that there's some kind of push for them to reimagine the kinds of roles that get nominated. I'm looking at the list of Best Supporting Actor nominees. It's a bit of a mystery how both Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield are both Best Supporting Actors in movies, because like if they're the supporting actors, like that movie ain't got no lead. Like, am I the lead? Did I just not know it? But they're both in Judas and the Black Messiah. Daniel Kaluuya, of course, is the chairman, Fred Hampton. But the question becomes, first of all, these nominations are kind of like, they feel like a little bit wedged in, because like the idea that Lakeith and Daniel have to compete in the same category, first of all, is just completely nuts. But it does feel like an effort, going forward. Chadwick Boseman is by far and away sort of the leading contender. May you rest in peace for Best Actor this year. Viola Davis is up for another award as Best Actress. Does that feel like an anomaly to you?
So here's the deal. I think the short answer is time will tell, right? Because here's what I'm a little bit cautious about. Remember I told you I'm cautiously encouraged? Absolutely, to see 9 total non-white nominees, that's awesome compared to 5 years ago with the hashtag #OscarsGoWhite, where it was a complete strikeout, right? And then 5 years ago, that wasn't the only year. I document in my book, there were several years where there just weren't any nominees whatsoever. Nothing happened, right? But here's the thing. I know COVID's been happening, but I don't know if you've been in a hotel lately. But I remember the last time I was in a hotel, I think it was like Hyatt Regency, some piece like that. And I remember when I checked in, I remember seeing this card, this little placard in the bathroom, right? So I said, okay, that's interesting. And so I picked it up and I read it, and it says something along the lines of this. I'm paraphrasing, right? But it says something along the lines, I'm answering your question, but it says something along the lines of this. It said, "We at the Hyatt love Mother Earth. And because we have profound respect for Mother Earth, we wish to conserve all of her gifts and her resources. If you also care about the planet we share, you will consider joining us in conserving resources and reuse your towels." Right? I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, I've seen this.
Okay.
This, yeah.
So here's the thing. I looked at it and I was like, ooh, Mother Earth. Much respect. But threw the car in the trash, I'm using this towel, and you're gonna give me some new towels tomorrow. And I'm gonna explain why. Because when I check out, Elamin, are they gonna deduct and debit my bill? They're gonna deduct the savings and the labor from the laundry and the labor. Are they gonna deduct that from my bill? The answer is no. So in other words, it sounds good, it sounds awesome, but it just so happens it coincides with your bottom line. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, I just don't know. And so all I'm saying, Elamin, is I just question the sincerity of diversity. And so that's where time will tell. I don't know if this is a knee-jerk reaction just to get all the bad press off the bat, because that's all anyone can talk about. Hashtag us so white. You know, that's the first thing everyone's looking for. Let me see. No one cares about anything. Let me see the number of nominees. And so, you know, so I don't know whether this is their way to cool the heat, because remember, corporate America can be quite agile, you know, and I don't want to leave out corporate Canada, but I know corporate America can be quite agile, right? Yeah. I mean, again, remember when I talked about summer social justice? I mean, you know, last June, I was, because I'm in the state of Texas, right? Last June, I'm receiving emails from Bed Bath & Beyond, Chase Bank, talking about how we love Juneteenth. And I'm saying, that's awesome, that's amazing. But at the same time, I'm just thinking, like, in all my years banking with Chase, in all my years, I just don't recall them celebrating Juneteenth earlier. Because remember, May 25th, George Floyd, all of a sudden, we love Juneteenth. So again, corporate America can be quite agile to respond because they want to keep the money flowing. So all I'm saying is time will tell. I'm encouraged, but I'll really be excited. I'll move from encouraged to excited if we keep this up 10 years in a row.
I have to say that I knew that something was up when I got a Black Lives Matter statement from Gushers, the candy. I was like, okay, I think we may have crossed the line here. I think we may have lost the plot in terms of who needs to speak on this and who needs to feel heard. I'm going to open up to questions in just a minute, but my last question for you is, how much trouble are we in if Denzel Washington and Viola Davis suddenly decide to retire, in terms of just like getting these numbers up in terms of nominations, because they are carrying the whole team right now?
True and correct. And with Viola Davis being the most nominated actress for 5 total, you're right. If, for example, like, you know, they does decide, you know, we're going to have a night on the town, Viola Davis, Denzel Washington, and then, you know, they pick up Morgan Freeman, they try to get some pizza. They get in a car accident. God help us all. We are in trouble. That's half the slate for the whole 91 years. That's it. And so here's the deal. I think your question speaks to the paucity of opportunity, right? And so here's the deal. Many of us know Tom Cruise. He's known for jumping on late night talk show couches, okay? But the thing is, while he's known for that, he didn't jump out of the womb as an A-list actor. He was developed over time, right? Hollywood made consistent and steady investments. You go from Risky Business to, you know, Top Gun to, you know, fast forward a few years later, now you have your whole Mission Impossible franchise, right? And so the idea is that I think Hollywood is just being lazy, right? Not taking the time to invest in, you know, up and coming talent. And I think it's easier, you know, with television products, but in terms of the movies, what's fascinating is how, despite the presumption, that's the idea that Hollywood is this creative liberal space, ironically, the bigger the project, the more conservative Hollywood gets, right? And so, you know, again, when so much money's on the line, you really don't want to leave so much up to chance, right? You want to make your money back and then some. And so, you know, I can bet you a Tim Hortons cup of coffee that, you know, Hollywood is definitely playing by a formula when it comes to these images and patterns. It's just a matter of whether we're able to just simply take a look and discover that which is hidden in plain sight.
I mean, you don't need to look further than, you know, last year's release, Tenet, which was supposed to save all movie theaters. And like, you know, starring a Black man, do you think they want to put him on any posters for that movie? You know, and he's Denzel's son. Like, if he can't get on a poster, none of them can. And he has, I think he's actually like a good example of the kind of talent. Yes, I understand that, like, he's Denzel's son and like he can just pick up the phone and get him into a role, but at the same time, he's being developed into like a Tom Cruise caliber kind of star, and it will be kind of a telling test case of how much investment goes into that development. You know, how much do they actually put him out there? Because like last year should have been his year. He should have been on every poster, on every talk show. Fine, COVID happened, but like that should not be the end of the story.
So, Elamin, speaking of, it seems like you want to move to a question, but real quick, speaking of posters, have you seen this one?
I have not seen this one.
I mean, no. I mean, I don't know if you saw the movie, but what's going on here? What's going on over here?
I mean,
what is going on? Can you explain it to me? I don't know what's going on. What's going on over here?
I sure can't. That is an incredible poster for 12 Years a Slave. That does not appear. I mean, poor Chiwetel here. That's horrifying. That is genuinely horrifying. Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious. I was hoping you could interpret. You know, I'm trouble processing some things. You know what I'm saying?
No, I think you got to the heart of the matter by just showing it. You know, I don't think you need to say much more to sort of drive that point home. But yeah, let's. We got a few minutes here. We got what? You got 5 minutes. We can open it up some questions. Let's see if we got some questions from folks. If you do, drop them in. There's one early one, which is like.
But let me ask you this, right?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I'll ask you a question. Canadian film, industry. To what degree, after reading the book or what have you, sampling, to what degree do you think Canadian film industry either replicates or departs from many of these problematic patterns we see from Hollywood?
It is much worse. Like, at least that's my impression. But it's also it's a much smaller industry. Like I don't want to understate here the number of films that are shown in this country that are made in America. It is probably like 99% of them. I will go months and months in movie theaters here in Canada without seeing a Canadian made film in the theater. It's I mean, we don't make stuff at a similar rate, and when we do, it's like really hard to get it into theaters. Part of that is that like most of our theater scene is really consolidated into like one big chain, maybe two, depending on where you are in the country. But it's the problems are the same because the movies we get here are the same. It is a very porous border, but in one direction. We get all of your films.
Right.
You likely have not heard of any of ours, basically.
Okay.
Okay, we got a question. Can you think of a movie that represents the Black experience / history well? Which I think is to say, like, maybe without the sort of problematic white gaze.
A movie that immediately jumps to mind would be The Great Debaters, actually. And no surprise that it's actually directed by an African-American individual, and that would be Denzel Washington, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think for so many reasons, well, okay, so here's the deal. I want to get, the critique out first. So, nothing man-made is perfect, except for my daughter. But the idea that this movie falls in line of another pattern of which I call para-realistic movies, meaning that most movies you see that prominently feature Black protagonists are based upon extraordinary true life events. Mm-hmm. And while I think it's awesome that we're, showcasing various aspects of the Black experience, at the same time, it still shows this paucity of opportunity to explore the freedom of fantasy I was referring to earlier, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that in many ways, it's like a shorthand. If you're going to make a story about Harriet Tubman, well, Harriet Tubman is already a very known commodity. And so it's almost like you're hedging your bets in terms of people coming into the audience already having known something about it, as opposed to Avatar, which was kind of sort of new and people tried it out and loved it, right? Yes. Same thing with Ray. Many people are just interested because they are fans of Ray Charles, or same thing with Ali. They're just fans of Ali, so they're just going to see the remake. Jamie Foxx is doing, Mike Tyson. People are just fans of Mike Tyson, so they're just going to go. So that's where Hollywood hedges its bets. And so this story of The Great Debaters falls within that pattern because it is based upon a true story. It's based upon the Wiley College debate team that had tremendous success in going to the East Coast and debating during segregated period time, the likes of Ivy Leagues of Harvard and whatnot. But that being said, with that critique out the way, this movie, in contrast to so many other movies I've seen, actually had developed character arcs. Forrest Whitaker's character started off one way and ended up a different way, right? So there was change there. There was change from numerous, individuals, from the young teenager to, even Nate Parker's role. I mean, I think that was one of his better roles. His Birth of a Nation, I think, was a bit anticlimactic. But I think that, this movie showed resilience. It showed the ability to adapt, change, to look within, to be inspired, camaraderie. I mean, there's so many redeeming qualities that made it a feel-good movie, and not to mention this idea of rebelliousness and activism. Denzel as the coach, was not playing by the rules, and and I think that spirit was a very good message to send, that sometimes we have to think outside the box, if we want to ameliorate and actually address the problems inside the box. So I say all that to say that I don't think it's any secret that in order to achieve this, you had an individual who not only was familiar with the industry, but who's also familiar with the African-American experience. And and then this is my whole argument. We need more Ang Lees. We need more, Boone Jones, of the world, to create more perspectives and angles for which we can understand our larger human experience. I think that we really stand to lose out when we only have stories being told from one perspective. And to the extent that we have, more eyes in the room, more voices, I think that, we stand to diversify, the quality and actually improve. And excuse me, is Bong Joon-ho, in terms of Parasite, which was an absolutely brilliant movie in terms of the stairs, the whole class, dynamic and commentary that he was making. And so I think we stand to miss out if we're not being more inclusive, to see the breadth of stories that can be told if we consider the art of the possible.
We have another question here, and it's about the movie If Beale Street Could Talk, of course, from Barry Jenkins. And look, listen, I think broadly speaking, Barry Jenkins is a good example of someone who I'm very excited about his future. It's pretty early on in his career. Like the fact that he won for Moonlight was such a significant win. Especially was it's like this tiny little movie. Yeah, it's got a lot of big stars in it, but like a lot of them, took on that role for like not a lot of money, because like that movie just did not have a lot of backing. It was a surprise win, and it was one of those wins that was like, oh, every once in a while we get one, and like this is good. Like this feels good to have got that one. And Barry Jenkins is of course like doing Underground Railroad, the adaptation next. But like I'm excited for him to get back to movies. And I'm like, let's get these numbers up in terms of Oscars. I think he's going to win some more. What do you think of that win? That Moonlight win, the nominations for If Beale Street Could Talk, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that it was almost, these were like crossover sleepers, that didn't benefit from all the fanfare. And speaking of, I think we talked about hashtag Me Too. That just points out another piece I want to speak to really quickly, which is the individual we think of most with hashtag Me Too is Harvey Weinstein, right? And in addition to his predilections for inappropriate behavior, he was also known for his heavy, hard-charging campaign. And so I think when we talk about the Academy Awards, we have to reconcile and resolve this idea that the winner is not necessarily dispositive of the best, right? The two aren't necessarily related. And so you can have a movie or actor or actress win an Academy Award, but that doesn't necessarily mean that was the best performance that year, right?
Yeah. I can just run a very good campaign.
Right. I mean, it's because of the campaigning and the politicking that's involved. I mean, think about, how can we explain The Color Purple absolutely striking out on 11 nominations, right? That's, whoa, like 11 nominations, or even Denzel Washington not winning for Malcolm X, arguably, which was a better acting performance than Training Day, right? Training Day, portraying the villainous, Alonzo Harris. And so I say that to say that If Beale Street Can Talk and Moonlight did not necessarily benefit from these hard-charging marketing machines, right? And so if anything, it speaks to this potential, that's untapped potential for talent. If here you have just these people, two turntables and a mic is what we say in the hip hop circles, right? If they have limited resources, and if their talent and if their stories are able to shine through regardless, well, oh my goodness, what if we actually pour a little bit of resources into the equation? Then what? There's no telling where the ceiling is. So
Yes.
if anything, these wins serve as an encouraging factor and a reminder to Hollywood that you're missing out here, right? I mean, there's, I've always said facetiously to many of my classes that the cure for cancer is where?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the ghetto, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're never going to know about it because many of these individuals are never going to have access, right? And
Yes.
to the resources or the opportunity. So to the extent that more Barry Jenkins in the world are allowed, not just like a door cracked open, but let's open the barn doors wide and say, here, play in the sandbox, just like they do with James Cameron. They don't even question the budget because they have the confidence that he's going to produce something of quality that's going to make the money back, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that you're right. We want to see more people making these decisions because we talked about the Writers Guild of America, but the Directors Guild of America is over 98% white. Mm. And remember, Directors Guild of America includes television, commercial, and made-for-television directors. So if you're really thinking about those who make movies for the mainstream screen, that's an even smaller percentage of, that's populated by, people, Black, Indigenous people of color. Mm-hmm. So my critique on If Beale Street Could Talk is similar to that of Fences and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, in that, it focuses on that aspect of the nuanced difficulties of the African-American experience. Mm-hmm. And so that's an important story to tell, but it's just, it goes in along with that pattern of that's what somehow resonates with the voters and then rises to the top, right? Those type of stories. And then, to that same point, Regina King, the Oscar runner from If Beale Street Can Talk, here she comes around with this fascinating project, right? Mm-hmm. That Night in Miami, right? Fascinating project. Mm-hmm. Dealing with this, this fantasy, the envelope pushing idea. And then all of a sudden strike out, like really, I can't even get a sniff. I can't get a bite, right? Yeah. So again, I think that was a missed opportunity by the Academy to highlight the intersectionality of not just a Black director, but also a woman of color director.
I'm right?
Because the intersectionality is something we often miss out on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be rude to David Fincher, but the first 6 minutes of One Night in Miami is better than the entirety of Mank. I said it. We're just gonna put it out there. Watch the opening scene. Just like watch the opening scene of One Night in Miami, and then see for yourself. We'll take the last question here, and I really like this question because I think it's a bigger question that I think invites us to think about the nature of award shows. And if you don't mind, I'm going to answer it first. But it's a question about all these ratings declining for the Oscars. Will they still be relevant? And my answer to that is always like, look, even if they're not relevant to people watching at home, they're relevant in the industry. And if you get a nomination, you get an opportunity. And studios are watching and they see who gets these nominations and they say, let's put some more resources behind that person. And so it becomes relevant because it becomes like a self-sustaining kind of machine, right? Like the attention begets more attention. And so to me, like the relevance of the award shows is never in how many millions of people are watching it at home, but it's always in this larger thing that like once you get that attention, you're nominated, maybe you win, the studio is more likely to get behind you. They're going to give you bigger opportunities. They might let you direct that $250 million movies. So like that's where the relevance comes in for me, but I don't know where you're at with this.
I think I'm going to have to up to Annie and not say you're not just 100% correct, but you're 102% correct on that one. Because here's the matter. I don't see their relevance going away anytime soon. And again, no disrespect to the Golden Globes, but Oscars are they're the king of the hill right now. And they have been for the last, 91 years. And so here's a couple of reasons why. I think they were very effective in making their production a production unto itself, right? Yes. And think about the irony behind this. We all publicly celebrate that which is privately decided. We don't know how many the voting members there are and how you get selected or tapped on the shoulder. It's all this secrecy and mystery. So it's really a private club that is, designed to protect the industry, right? Mm-hmm. And it is successful in that we all tune in. We're so concerned. People have their nose 2 inches away from the screen to figure out who's walking down the red carpet. Nominees get swag bags with over 150 grand worth of materials. And, not to mention the idea that if I'm going to advertise during the Oscars, I'm only going to have to pony up 3 to 5 million for 30 seconds ads, right? Because the Academy Awards are shown in over 255 countries. And it's only the second most televised, most watched program on the planet behind the Super Bowl, right? And that's American football, not soccer. My apologies.
Yes.
Right. And so again, we're talking about, for all intents and purposes, we have to ask the question, it behooves us to ask the question, well, what is happening with the Oscars with so many eyes watching the Oscars, right? And so the Oscars may not be a big deal to you, Elamin, but, this is not to say that Oscars are not a big deal. And most especially within the industry, right? Where, a simple word from, a simple person, can, make or break a career. This can be the difference between someone being hired for, a new project or not. Right, this idea of them being able to add to the resume, the luster, and the panache of, being either nominated or being a winner, right? And so I think the true dividends are actually seen for most of the positions and awards behind the camera. Actually, that's where the leverage is strongest, particularly with Black, Indigenous people of color. What we call Oscar bounce is not as pronounced. So for example, look at Anne Hathaway. Even though she won a Best Supporting Actress Academy Award, she actually went on to star in many of her own movies subsequently, right? Compare that to Lupita Nyong'o, who won Best Supporting Actress in 12 Years a Slave, of course. Do you remember her next role after that? Her very next role?
No.
How about she was a flight attendant in Nonstop with Liam Neeson?
God. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, you don't even remember that, right?
Yeah.
Or take Jennifer Hudson. Do you know what her next role was after winning the Oscar?
No.
Okay, and again, I don't want to hype this up too much, but for a second, I just want an audience to consider. In nearly a century, let's think about the scores of movies that have been made. Let's consider the total number of actors and actresses who have walked this planet, daring to dream about being on stage and hearing their name called, being recognized as the best, being at the pinnacle of their craft. Jennifer Hudson entered this hallowed pantheon of winners. And her next role was playing the assistant to Sarah Jessica Parker in Sex and the City.
Oy. Yeah, I think that drives it home. That drives it all home.
And even worse, the last thing I'll say, she did not deliver Sarah Jessica Parker Tim Hortons coffee.
What an excellent ending point. Thank you for that riveting journey through all of this. I love how much of the history that you brought in, but also I think all the different roads that we ended up going down. The book is Black Oscars. Thank you so much for that, Dr. G. That was incredible. Yeah, and I appreciate, shout out to Jorge for opening up the space. Shout out to Candy for, being on the ones and twos. And shout out to you, Elamin. We definitely got to connect and continue to build. I really like the chemistry. I appreciate you taking the time to read the book. I'm glad it didn't put you to sleep too much. You know what I'm saying? And lastly, I just like to apologize to the Queen for getting a little, exercise. But when I talk about soul, forgive the pun, but I get a little animated.
I was going to say, I really appreciate all the energy that you brought to the stage and your passion. And we could tell that everything you put into that book just really comes pouring out of you. So thank you for sharing all of that passion with us and your knowledge, and Elamin for just guiding us in such an exciting way and creating that chemistry between you two on stage. That was magical. So thanks for that. I'm going to ask you to leave the stage now while I do my wrap up, but thanks again, and see you soon.
Thanks. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, man. So thank you all of you for joining us. If you want to watch this event again or share it with your friends, like I said at the beginning, it is being live streamed to our Facebook page, so it will be available on our video section on the Facebook page for the foreseeable future, so you can share it with your friends there or watch it again. I know there was a lot of quotable moments in this event, so you might want to go back there and rewatch. I know I will. If you want to give us feedback about this event, we would love that. And I'm going to tell you something. We are a public institution, so our job is to do programs that work for you. So your feedback is really important so that we keep getting better at this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to share a link to a quick form. It's a survey. It takes you about 2 minutes to fill out. And I promise you, your answers are not going to go into some black hole of the internet. They're going to go straight to my team, to my inbox. And I sit with my team every week and we look at what you write. So we do take into account your feedback and your comments to make sure that we're programming things that are interesting to you. So please take a second to respond to that. Now, on that note, speaking of programming, I'm going to end by telling you about 2 exciting events that are coming up soon, and then I'm going to leave you. So on Thursday, April 22nd, so in a week, we have an event with Gabrielle Bluestone. Now, she's a journalist who used to write for Vice, but now she was also the producer for the popular Netflix documentary, Fire. It was that documentary about, the Fire Music Festival that was a scam. And so she's going to be presenting a new book called Hype, which is about how the internet is being taken over by scammers and con artists, and really what we can do about it. So that's going to be very exciting, Thursday, April 22nd. And then on Friday, the 23rd, so the next day, we're going to have a lunchtime event with a Giller shortlisted author, bestseller. Her name is Kim Eklund. And she wrote an incredible novel called Speak Silence, which is about the Bosnian War and the atrocities that women endured. So that's April 23rd, lunchtime event. And I hope you come to those events. And that's it for today. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to now do the awkward thing and wave at you and disappear slowly. But we're going to keep this event open for about 5 minutes, just so that you can click around some of these links. And if you want to connect with each other, you can do that as well. So have a good night. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Goodbye.